All right, so really all we have so far is this aspirin argument for serotonin causing depression. There was a study that came out in 2003 or 2005, one of those, by Avshalom Caspi, a researcher working in New Zealand with 1,000 subjects he followed from birth. And it was a geneticist, and he took their blood and looked at their genes. And there was this one gene he was interested in called the serotonin transporter gene. So he thought that maybe something to do with the genetics of serotonin not the serotonin molecule, but the thing that receives serotonin, the little slot that it goes in, maybe that would have something to do with depression. And this is mentioned in your textbook, and he showed that so everyone knew, first of all, getting to the whole situational versus chemical imbalance thing, that is just totally wrong. Everyone has always known, every scientist, every clinician has always known that stress is associated with depression. In other words, being at high levels of stress increases the likelihood that you're going to become depressed. And Caspi knew this as well, this New Zealand researcher. And so he wanted to see if, the very interesting thing scientifically is, you think about it, stroke your beard and say, okay, stress is associated with depression, but look at some people, like, they appear to have a ton of stress and they're not depressed. But some people have that lot of stress and they do become depressed, or some people might even have a little bit of stress and they become depressed. So what is going on there? Well, what is different between the people, equal levels of stress, and one gets depressed and one doesn't? That's fascinating scientifically. I hope you're fascinated by that question. What is the magic sauce that makes the difference there? Well, Caspi said to himself, maybe it's something genetic, maybe it's a gene, maybe they have a different gene. And so he looked at the serotonin transporter gene as one possible exemplar of that maybe this is the gene that's different. Maybe the people that do get depressed have one version of the gene, and the people that don't get depressed under same amount of stress have another version of the gene. That's exactly what he found, okay? There's 3 versions of the gene, and if you have, basically, a gene has alleles, and they can either, for this particular gene, they can either be short or they can be long. And you get 2 of this gene, one from your mom, one for your dad. And if you have the short, you are very likely to become depressed under stress. If you're not stressed and you have the short, you're not going to become depressed. But if you're under a lot of stress, and stress could be like, I got married this year. I mean, it's a nice thing, but it's a change in your life. It's hard for your brain to adapt and stuff. Or it could be, I lost my job, or I had finals, or I was in a stressful time at school, whatever. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts and my manager kept yelling at me. Lots of different types of stress. But if you don't have stress, you're probably not going to become depressed. Not a very high likelihood. But if you do become depressed and you have the short version of this gene, both your alleles are short, very likely to become depressed. 40% chance, say. If you have the long, that's like protective against depression. So you're very stressed, but now there's only a 15% chance you're going to become depressed. Maybe less than half, as if you had the short. So it's like the holy grail here. It's this gene-environment interaction that Caspi found. That it's stress, and it's something with serotonin, with the serotonin transporter. It's the gene, baby. It was extremely exciting finding. In fact, within about 10 years, less than that, within about 5 years, that study by Caspi became the most cited paper in the history of psychiatry. Psychiatry's been around for a long time. Freud, it's a psychiatrist. But within 5 years, this was the most cited paper in the history of psychiatry. In other words, everyone looked at this study and they were like, this is the answer. This is really important. It spurred a lot of new research. So serotonin is involved, right? But no, here's the thing. Caspi was wrong, okay? Your textbook sort of hints at this, but then backpedals from it, but your textbook is out of date. Even though it came out this year, it just, I disagree with your textbook in the sense that I definitely think Caspi was wrong. There's other people tried to replicate the finding that Caspi did, multiple people, and Caspi had 1,000 people in his study. In 2017, a group did meta-analysis where they looked at many different studies that did what Caspi did and had a total sample across those studies of like 40,000 people, so 40 times the sample that Caspi had. And guess what? There's no interaction between that gene and the environment. The serotonin transporter gene has nothing to do with your risk for depression. Caspi must have just seen a blip, a randomness in his data. Possibly the reason for that, to be honest with you, is that he's a geneticist. Do you know how many genes there are? It's like 30,000 genes or whatever. So I think he probably looked at a lot of genes, and by chance this one happened to be showing something interesting, so that's the one he published on. But he probably looked at like a few hundred other genes that showed nothing, and so I think that was just a blip that Caspi was unlucky or lucky, depending on how you look at it, to find. Made him very famous, but then he turned out to be wrong, so it's kind of a blessing and a curse. So yeah, nothing going on with the serotonin transporter gene. So we've got the aspirin argument in the sense that these MAOA inhibitors work and serotonin reuptake inhibitors work. That's SSRIs, that's what we call antidepressants now, Prozac, Celexa, those are drugs that block the reuptake of serotonin in your synapse, and so basically it's just boosting the amount of serotonin that's floating around in there, boosting serotonin activity basically, and they work to treat depression. Okay, well, what did you learn from our good friend Ian there in that 60 minutes clip that I had you watch for this module? Well, I hope you learned that serotonin reuptake inhibitors
in
don't
a quarter
actually
mile,
work.
continue straight onto Turnpike Street, Winthrop Avenue.
Or that they do, but they don't work better than placebos.